So how to like avoid burnout?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want me to? Do you have?
Go first. Yeah.
So I get burnt out a lot, but I just keep working anyway. It's kind of like working out. You have to sort of work through your burnout, even if it's like really bad. Like I make 5 to 7 comics a week. Not all of them are going to be good, but a few of them are going to be kind of bad. And that's kind of what you have to do when you have burnout is to just keep making it anyway. And then you'll still get burnout, but it'll be less and less. You'll be able to know how to manage it when it comes. But that's how I handle it. I'm not sure if Tim does it the same way.
I think the stress for someone like you is that you're both the artist and the writer. So you not only have to draw, but you have to come up with the ideas. That is a burden I would not want because all I do is draw. I have a writer and he comes up with the ideas. So I feel like that's mentally exhausting. I think that's where a lot of the burnout comes in. Burnout for an artist, if all you do is draw, is a physical burnout where you can't draw anymore because physically you're unable to. That happened not too long ago, so I'm kind of a workaholic. I like doing pages a day, and I mean the whole page. That's from the penciling, inking, and the coloring to the lettering. And normally I finish a page in 4 to 8 hours, but I won't stop until it's done. Until finally like my wrist will hurt. And then that's the only burnout that I experienced. But I've heard stories of other artists who were like, I'm tired of drawing, I'm tired of drawing this thing again. And so I think the way to avoid burnout in that regard is you gotta love what you do. And I like drawing. Every day I wake up and I feel blessed that I can do that and actually produce something. And so I just challenge myself every day where it's like, okay, assuming I'm healthy and physically able to, how can I draw this character differently than before? Some people, like for example, they don't like drawing perspective shots where you're having to draw like a skyscraper or something, and they try to avoid it. Me personally, I try to take it on as a challenge where it's like, oh boy, well if you tell me that I can't do it, there's part of me that's like, nah, I've never been good at sports, like I've never been athletic or anything, but I can draw. So I'm going to try and tackle drawing that skyscraper as much as I can. So I think a lot of it's your perspective in terms of how you look at it. And most of the artists that I know who do get burned out is because they've lost the passion and they just treat it as like a rote thing that they just go through the wheels of doing. So that would be my suggestion, my advice for artists at least. Next question. Yes. Yes.
How do you come up with a good title for your webtoon or comic?
That's for you.
Like a title? Because mine is just Flork of Cows.
How did you come up with that?
I just made it up.
That's not the story you told me. You want me to tell the story but in like the clean version?
No, I'm good. We'll save that for
Okay. So like I said, being the writer, like it's someone else's job to do that. I don't necessarily have to come up with it, but there are times where I've come up with titles. Like for example, for our volume titles, I come up with that, but I have it kind of easy because we have a patriotic theme. So all we do is we do puns on things that already exist. So for example, our first volume was called Stars and Strife, as opposed to Stars and Stripes. So all I have to do is, I use this like really expensive thing called a thesaurus, and I see like what rhymes with stripes. It's like volume 2 is called The Founding Fighters. So it's like what rhymes with fathers, and I come up with it that way. So to me, it's like playing on easy mode. But my writer, I'm just very blessed because he's naturally clever, like he's just a funny guy. And so he's so quick-witted that he doesn't ever have to stop and think. And at one time I asked him, because we're doing like conventions a lot, we're on the road for 6 to 12 hours at any time. And I'm like, how do you come up with like some of these clever ideas? And it turns out he has memorized pretty much every season of The Simpsons up to volume 5. And so he'll just like, at times I'll be like sleepy, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, there's not like a place to stop for the next like hour, but I'm about to fade out. And he's like, all right, I'm gonna start quoting Simpsons quotes to you. And he'll just keep me up awake by like repeating them. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like why do you remember this stuff? I was like, and he's like, because I was never good academically, but I was able to memorize like every episode of The Simpsons until season 5. I'm like, my gosh, it's so crazy. He was telling me this one, we almost swerved off the road because I was laughing so hard. So don't get me wrong, I'm quoting him, quoting The Simpsons. And so he was like, all right, so there's this time when it's McBain, and he's like the Arnold Schwarzenegger analog, and he lands on top of a fighter jet and rips the cockpit off, and the guy says, please don't kill me. And he says, "You first," and throws it out of the plane. And I couldn't stop laughing because I just thought it's so funny because it doesn't even make sense in like the way it works. But I can see it in my head and I remember the episode. But for him, he just has to pull from like this Rolodex of just kind of funny moments and think to himself like, what's the way that we could kind of adapt the same joke for our work too? So I think that's a part of how that operates. Yes, you.
How old were you when you started writing comics?
That's a good question. How old were you when you started writing comics?
I think I started my first comics when I was a kid, actually, when I was 16. And I still, because I've always made comics on the internet, it's just not what got popular like they are now. But I think I started when I was around 16 or 17.
Yeah, same here. I think I was drawing little comics for myself when I was like 6 or 7. And it was just something you encouraged because when we were kids, comic books were pretty common and they were cheap. We would go to Walmart and typically there was a spinner rack. And back then comics you could probably get for $1. And if you had some money left over, you could buy, some of the more expensive comics were like maybe $2 at the most. So I think everyone in my grade school read them. We read Superman, Batman, Spider-Man up until probably 5th grade. So we were always drawing comics as far back as I can remember. Any other questions? I saw there. Yeah.
I'm trying to think how to word this. Do you ever have anything that gets really popular that you were kind of like, really? versus something that you wanted to get really popular but just went nowhere?
That's a great question.
Yeah, I make a lot of comics where I make it, I'm like, yeah, that's gonna kill. And it's got like 300 likes, so like, then I make another one that's like really, really stupid. Like, I made one recently where it was the Goth and the Cowboy comic.
Yeah!
I didn't think that was going to get popular.
Yeah.
I wake up the next morning, it's like 30,000 likes. So I'm like, oh, are you kidding me?
So for those of you, I don't know if you've seen the meme, but how do I put this? So it's a goth girl, and I think she lives in Texas, but she's driving a tractor. And she knows how to drive the tractor.
Yeah, I follow her. She followed me because of that.
Yeah,
It's
that's
funny,
so crazy.
yeah.
And so you in your head were thinking goth girl, tractor. It makes sense. Pair her up with the cowboy kid, you know? And then like you put that out there, and I was like, that's like lightning in the bottle because it's on everyone's mind. And so I saw that she started following you, and then I looked at her account. And she's like, I have made it. And it's the goth girl, like outside the Bass Pro Shop, like that pyramid.
I ended up drawing her own goth girl when she followed me.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know anything about the goth tractor girl until after I made that comic.
Right.
It was funny.
So that was just like, yeah, that was great. For us, there was a joke. It was in our first volume. And don't get me wrong, I think my writer's funny, but to me that wasn't the funniest quote. So there's in our comic, there's a bad guy. And it's implied that she's Russian, and so she has like a Russian like paramilitary team with her, and they're behind her, and they're mumbling, and they're mad. And the joke is that there's a word balloon, and it just says angry Russian noises. and then she turns around and starts yelling at them, and it just says angrier Russian noises. And to me, I was like, oh, that's kind of funny. But then like people started like putting it on like social media, and like there's a nice lady over here in the other exhibit hall, and she started selling buttons that actually say like angry Russian noises and angrier Russian noises. And I was like, man, 6 volumes of this, and that's like the funniest joke we came up with. Okay, I guess it works.
Another kind of related to what the question was is I had a comic I made one time that was a completely joke comic. And the punchline was a furry named Pickles the Wolf, and he was completely green. And I found out that actually existed, and that person's name was Pickles the Wolf, and it looked exactly like the character I drew, before I even knew about them. It was the weirdest thing ever.
Any other questions? Anyone? Now's the time to ask. All right.
You have a writer. Is there ever time that you wish you'd write yourself and do the whole thing?
No. Never, ever. And that's a rare thing, because what happens is, a little bit of inside baseball, in comics, especially in the West, you typically, I had no idea, okay, my job is I'm an ear doctor. I diagnose hearing loss. That's my day job. My side hustle, or my hobby, is comics. So I had no idea that in Western comics, whether it's Marvel, DC, Image, you name it, writers and artists hate each other. Like, they've hated each other for a long time because it's like a band where you have like the singer, the drummer, the bass player, and the lead guitar. Apparently that's why a lot of bands break up, is like the bass player feels like he's not as good as the lead artist. And normally at a comic convention, the #1 question you get is like, who's more important, the artist or the writer? And I'm like, I don't want to answer that question because my answer is they're both equally important. It's like, you can't operate without your brain or your heart, so it's dumb to ask like which one's more important, the brain or the heart. Well, you gotta have both of them to work. And so I've encountered several people where creative teams break up because the artist is like, I can do that. Like, people come for the art, they don't come for the writer, they come for me. And I'm just like, without my writer, my book would suck. Like, I have no idea like how any of this should work. I have a very amorphous idea in my head how the plot will go, but I need someone to make it a reality. And then after they make it a reality in my head and in his head, then I can incarnate it and put it onto paper, and I think that's how the magic happens. So there hasn't been any time this kind of desire on my own to just do it by myself. And in fact, I dread the day if something were to happen to him, I'd be like, I don't know what to do. I would have to find a writer who I feel like is competent enough to write the same way he does to kind of flesh everything out. But it's not uncommon. There are a lot of writers or artists who do want to go independent because they think that they can do it. A little bit of a history lesson. So when Image Comics formed, some of you might know, like Spawn is probably the most popular one. That's by Todd McFarlane. The second one was probably Savage Dragon, which is by Eric Larson. But Image, they were at the height of their game because they were artists who broke off from Marvel and said, we don't need Marvel because we don't like their page rate, we don't like how they treat us. We're the powerhouse, they need us more than we need them, we're gonna form Image Comics. And they were doing gangbusters for their first year, but their sales just dropped after that. And part of it was a twofold reason. One, they couldn't get their books out on time because they were artists, but they didn't have editors to like basically rein them in and say, hey, you gotta put a book out every so often. So they ignored that. Second thing was, they were all artists. They didn't hire any writers. So their art was good. They sold lots and lots of comics, but by the time issue 2 came around, they just knew. People could just tell, like, wow, the art is phenomenal. It's like 10 out of 10. The writing is like a 2 out of 10 as far as the quality is concerned. And then by the second year of Image Comics, they started hiring writers, but it was too late after that. Image has never really, Image at the end of their first year was really up there with Marvel and DC. Now they're, typically it's Marvel, DC, Image, and they've just never recovered from that to get to where they were at their zenith. Any other questions that people might have? Yes, a couple in the back. Let's go with the gentleman. Yes. Yes, you.
How do you balance your day job with your side hustle?
I don't sleep. I get about 5 hours of sleep a night if I'm lucky, and I don't have kids. That helps too. So typically I will work until 2 or 3 in the morning, and then my day will typically start around 8 o'clock. I'll wake up and then just repeat everything again, and I will keep on working until it's done. But I will tell you one thing that I've set for myself. My goal is I have to get the page done that day. So if I have to draw twice as fast or take some shortcuts, I will do it until the page is done. So that's typically how I do it to maintain it. Now, if I do have a kid, I come back in like a year or 2 and ask me, and it might be a completely different world once that happens. Yes, you with the hand up. What's the funniest comic that you think you ever made?
Funniest comic I think I ever made. Jeez, that's a hard one.
McDonald's one's pretty good.
Which one?
The McDonald's Sprite one.
Oh no, we can't repeat that in this audience. Come by his booth later and he'll tell you about it. Yeah, that's for the adults in the room.
I can't mention that. I can't
How about the
mention
Bionicle
that.
one?
The Bionicle one?
Yeah, the one where the guy brings back his girlfriend to the house and he uses the Bionicle to clean up. It was so out there.
I think I don't know if I can say it unless it's a 18 plus. It was kind of a dirty comic.
So all your favorite comics are the dirty comics?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, well, I'll give it a soft version of it. the droid from Star Wars. It was Roger Roger. And the comic was like, do we have to go to bed with the Star Wars battle droid? And she says, yes, I need him to say it. And the last panel was Roger Roger. That was probably one of my favorites.
If you ever follow him on social media, I mean, I laugh at every single one of his comics. I think they're all really good. Me personally, the funniest comic we ever made, I don't know. That's a really good question. Yeah, I think as far as comedy is concerned, I think that's definitely like just something for you.
Florida Girl is great.
Florida Girl's good. So
Not
we teamed up with Merriweather. So Merriweather is the king of webcomics. Very nice man, and he has a series of strips. If you've ever seen those comics where it's like if a Sega were like a real anime girl, or like a Nintendo were a real anime girl, or my favorite one was like the Internet Explorers, where it was like the web browsers, like the difference between like an Internet Explorer versus like a Brave versus a Google Chrome, whatever. And he's gotten so big that I don't think he even like, he always outsources his work now, so it's other artists who do the work, and typically he will work with his editor and script. But we teamed up with him with Florida Girl. So some of you know Florida Man. So Florida Man is just this meme where it's like all the weird stories come out of Florida, where it's like Florida Man like eats 2 golf balls and wrestles an alligator. Must go to hospital to get his stomach pumped. I'm like, I have so many questions. Like I don't even know like where that's coming from. So he created this character named Florida Girl, and she's supposed to be like the epitome of like all those weird stories. And so it starts off with like this girl, like a little 5-year-old, she's sitting on a park bench, and she's eating like ice cream, and like a giant alligator comes and eats her ice cream cone, and she's like, it ate my ice cream cone. And then you hear like, bam! And it's like this Cadillac drives up, and the door kicks open, and all this Pabst Blue Ribbon comes out, like these empty cans. And then like Florida Girl comes out, and she's like, I'm Florida Girl, I'm here to save the day. And then she suplexes the alligator, and then the little girl's like, Florida Girl! And that's it, like that's the story. But we got to collaborate with him because it turns out that he liked our book, Kamen America, and we liked Florida Girl. So there were 2 Florida Girl strips where she was independent, and the last 2 Florida Girl strips, she teamed up with Kamen America. And I'm very proud of those because it was 2 creative teams that kind of collaborated to make that happen. So you can find them on YouTube. They're actually dubbed in Japanese and in English. So all you have to do is type in Florida Girl, Kamen America, or Florida Girl, Merriweather, and you can actually watch the animated video for those. And I think there's one more question that was way in the back. Do you still have a question over there or not? Did you have one? Okay.
Do you have a particular software you use?
A particular
Software you use?
software? I use Procreate. It's a $4.99 program that you can download for iPad and for Android, and you do it on your tablet. I almost never use my computer unless it's for some special effects I need to do in Photoshop that I can't do in Procreate, which is very, very, very rare. It almost never happens. And then he uses a really, really expensive program called
Microsoft 8.
Microsoft Paint. And you can get it it's free from those computers, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And you don't even use the fancy 3D one, do you?
No.
Paint 3D.
No.
Okay, yeah. Anyone else? Any other questions before we adjourn for today? One right there, okay?
So, what makes you think to draw a sock? Like,
Yeah.
what inspired you to bring a sock? Or like, did you go through a process to get something else?
It was just really easy. There wasn't really much of a deep lore to that. It's just a character that I developed over time, and it used to be like little goblins, but then it kind of mutated more into a sock puppet because I could draw them quickly. I could draw them the way that I like, and I've drawn them so much now that it's like second nature. That I don't even think about it. So that's why I like drawing them, because I pretty much got them down.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I wanted to know how you enjoying Texas.
Huh?
Have you
How you
been?
guys enjoying Texas?
It's great.
This is his first appearance in Texas.
Yeah.
At Milk Run. It's my 5th.
Yeah, people are so nice here. It's been great the whole trip.
Yes, we
Yeah,
are.
I really like it.
Do you have a question? What did you say?
Is that sarcasm?
No. I've been taking this guy on the whirlwind tour of Texas. He lands in Austin at 9 o'clock. We pick him up. I'm like, all right, they're gonna kill you if you don't do this. We're gonna go to Whataburger. And so we flew right into that Whataburger, less than a block away from the terminal. I was like, okay, they close at 10 o'clock. It is 9:40. Okay, let's eat. He's like, I can pay for it. He's like, no. We're gonna do this. And then afterwards, like, all right, now we're gonna go to Buc-ee's. He's like, what's Buc-ee's? I was like, we're gonna go. We're gonna make it there. And he did shop at Buc-ee's. And then after he was done, I was like, but did you go to the bathroom? He was like, no. You better go to the bathroom.
I've never heard one man say, go in the bathroom so much.
That's what Buc-ee's is cool for.
Yeah, it is. And then because I lived here for a number of years, yesterday in this very room, I was like, we're gonna have a little private thing, and I went and got Miller's Smokehouse.
Oh, yeah.
Some of the best barbecue in Texas, and I think you liked it.
Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah. But he's been having a blast, and we're glad to have him here, and hopefully maybe you'll see him again next year if the schedule works out.
Yeah.
This has been great. You can find us in the rotunda, in the hall behind us. We'll be here until the close. Make sure you stop by and say hello before he sells out of merchandise, because I know he's
Yeah,
really
got much left.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys so much. Enjoy the rest of the show. Thank you for coming to Bell County Comic Con.